The couple with $5 million is staring down a projected lifetime tax bill of $1.9 million. The couple with $2.5 million, $600,000. And here is the part that is going to genuinely ruin your afternoon. The optimal tax move for the $5 million couple is to convert less to Roth, not more. And if they do not know that, they will silently hand the IRS over $1.1 million they absolutely did not have to pay. Most people frame this comparison wrong. They think 5 million is 2.5 million, but easier. Twice the income, twice the runway, twice the peace of mind. Mostly right, except for the specific places where they are spectacularly, expensively wrong. And those are the exact parts nobody warned them about. The parts that cost the most, precisely because they come packaged as success. Here is what I am actually going to show you today. Not a surface level comparison, not 5 million is better, the end. I am going to walk through two real retirement plans. Same age, same state, same investment strategy, same lifestyle goals, and show you where the math diverges, where the psychology diverges, and specifically where the $5 million retiree can make a mistake, the $2.5 million retiree literally cannot make, because they do not have enough money to make it. Think about that for a second. There is a version of being wealthy that creates problems that poverty simply cannot afford to have. I want to use one metaphor, and I am going to come back to it relentlessly for the rest of this video. Think about a volume dial. Both of these couples are playing the same song, same fears, same questions, same psychological tracks that come built into being human and having money. The only difference is the $5 million couple has louder speakers. Same song. Louder speakers. That phrase is going to mean something very specific to you by the end of this, and every section is going to add another layer to it. Let me set up the two households. Both couples are 65 years old, both fully retired, both live in California, both use the same diversified investment strategy, same allocation, same risk profile, same rebalancing approach. The only real difference, couple one has $5 million with $4 million in traditional IRAs and $1 million in a taxable brokerage account. Couple two has $2.5 million with $2 million in IRAs and $500,000 in brokerage. I am deliberately excluding Social Security and pensions from this analysis. Portfolio only. That keeps a comparison clean and isolates exactly what the asset level difference actually does to a retirement plan without other variables muddying the picture. Before we go any further, I want to introduce someone. Call him Marcus. He spent 31 years in corporate finance, maxed his 401k every single year, starting in 1992, lived below his means when everyone around him was upgrading everything, and retired at 64 with just over $5 million. He did everything right. And about 3 months into retirement, he started losing sleep. Not because he was running out of money, he was not. He was losing sleep for a reason that did not exist when he was broke. I want you to hold Marcus in the back of your mind throughout this video, because his story ends somewhere most people do not expect, and it connects to almost every point I am about to make. Now, the income math, and I promise the first thing here is less interesting than the second thing, but the first thing sets up the second thing, so stay with me. The $2.5 million couple, on a pure portfolio withdrawal basis, using a sound dynamic strategy, can generate roughly $8,000 to $10,000 per month in retirement income. The $5 million couple is looking at $16,000 to $20,000 per month, roughly double the portfolio, roughly double the monthly check. No surprises, no revelations. This is what everybody already assumes. But here is where most people stop thinking. And here is where the analysis actually starts to earn its keep. Both couples, under a guardrail-style withdrawal strategy, the kind that adjusts dynamically based on portfolio performance rather than locking in a fixed percentage, would need to see their portfolio drop by about 46% before they need to cut their monthly income. Same percentage, same threshold, which, on the surface, sounds like equal protection, equal resilience. It is not. For the $2.5 million couple, a 46% drop means the portfolio has fallen roughly $1.1 to $1.2 million before they need to adjust. That is painful. It is not pleasant, but it is a number the brain can process. For the $5 million couple, That same 46% means a $2.2 to $2.3 million swing before the guardrail triggers. Same percentage. Completely different emotional experience. There is decades of research on loss aversion. Kahneman and Tversky established the basic finding that losses feel roughly twice as painful as equivalent gains feel good. What gets less attention is that this effect does not scale linearly with dollar amounts. Losing $2 million does not feel twice as bad as losing $1 million. For most people, it lands somewhere between 4 and 5 times as devastating, because the brain cannot process large numbers proportionally. It registers enormous loss, danger, something is wrong. And it does this even when the plan is technically still on track. I saw this directly in the spring of 2020, when markets dropped about 34% in roughly 5 weeks. I spoke with people at all different portfolio levels that quarter. The people with $1 million portfolios were nervous. Several people with $4 and $5 million portfolios, who technically had more cushion, more diversification, better access to professional guidance, were in genuine psychological distress. Not because their plan was broken, because the dollar number moving on the screen was large enough to activate a level of dread that felt qualitatively different from anything they had ever experienced. A couple I know retired in 2019, about $4.8 million. Carefully planned, watched their statement drop by roughly $1.6 million in March of 2020. The percentage loss was almost identical to what someone with $800,000 experienced, but the $800,000 person lost $180,000 on paper. They went to bed nervous. The $4.8 million couple had a crisis conversation about whether to move everything to cash. They nearly did. Their plan was fine. Their psychology was not. Same song, louder speakers. This is where I want to plant a flag we are coming back to later. More money increases your capacity. It does not automatically increase your confidence. And the distance between those two things, capacity and confidence, is where the actual retirement experience lives. Most retirement planning is obsessively focused on the capacity side. Almost none of it deals seriously with the confidence side. That asymmetry costs people, quietly, consistently, and at scale. In a few minutes, I'm going to show you the single most counterintuitive tax finding in this entire comparison, a mistake that the $5 million couple makes specifically because of their success, and that the $2.5 million couple is structurally incapable of making. But first, I need to show you why having surplus income is a more complicated problem than it sounds. For the $2.5 million couple living in California, the monthly income covers housing, groceries, healthcare premiums, insurance, and leaves some room for travel and the occasional upgrade. It is a genuinely good life. But here is the thing. Most of the money has a destination. It is spoken for. And that clarity, counterintuitive as this sounds, is a feature, not a limitation. For the $5 million couple, basic needs are covered and there is money left over every single month with nowhere specific to go. And at first, that sounds like the dream. You spent decades working toward more than enough. You finally have it. But more than enough quietly changes the question. It shifts from, can we afford this? Which is a binary and relatively easy question, to, should we do this? And should we is a fundamentally harder question. It is a question about values, priorities, identity, and meaning. None of those things can be resolved with a spreadsheet. I know a couple details changed. Pattern is real. Who retired with just over $5 million and immediately tried to act the part? Business class, upgraded hotels. The planner had added $4,000 a month of discretionary spending to their plan. Completely sustainable. They tried it for 3 months and came back. It did not feel like anything. The extra spending was generating extra decisions, but not extra satisfaction. They were trying to spend their way to a feeling they assumed more money was supposed to deliver. The feeling did not show up. This is documented, by the way. Research published in the journal Science in 2008 found that spending money on others produces measurably more happiness than spending the same amount on yourself. And this held across income levels. More money amplifies this dynamic. It does not change it. Same song, louder speakers. The couple I just mentioned, eventually redirected that surplus. They helped a grandchild with college costs, not eventually through an estate, but right now, in real time, in a way where they could see it land. They funded something they had cared about for 20 years, but had always set aside. The satisfaction they got from that was qualitatively different from anything they'd bought for themselves. And I have heard a version of this story from enough people to believe it is not an exception. All right, now the part you actually came for, the tax trap. And I want to be direct. This is the most counterintuitive finding in this comparison, and it is also the most expensive mistake I see high net worth retirees make. So by the way, if you are finding value here, hit subscribe right now. The YouTube algorithm is genuinely unpredictable, and if you don't, there is a real chance it never surfaces another one of my videos for you. I put actual tax code references, actual thresholds, and actual projected numbers into these things. 2 seconds, worth it. Here is the setup. The $2.5 million couple, if they do nothing clever brokerage account first, then IRA withdrawals in the obvious order, is looking at a projected lifetime tax bill of just over $600,000. Not trivial, but manageable across a multi-decade retirement. Now, if they execute a thoughtful Roth conversion strategy, converting up to the top of the 12% tax bracket, they can move roughly $129,000 per year from their traditional IRA into a Roth IRA. They do this consistently every year until approximately 2043, then shift to tax-free Roth distributions starting in 2044 and beyond. No income taxes on those withdrawals, no Medicare premium surcharges. Projected lifetime tax savings from this strategy, $618,000, roughly equal to their entire baseline tax bill if they had done nothing. That is an enormous result from a relatively simple structural decision. So you are thinking, and I know you're thinking this, because it is the logical conclusion that the $5 million couple should do the same thing, just scaled up. Larger IRA balance, larger future required minimum distributions starting at age 73, greater exposure to high tax brackets in their late 70s. Convert aggressively now, fill the 22% bracket, maybe the 24% bracket. Get ahead of it while you still control your income composition. That is the conventional wisdom. It is also, in this specific scenario, completely and expensively backwards. The $5 million couple's optimal Roth conversion strategy converts less per year, not more. Their sweet spot is converting only up to the first IRMA threshold, which in 2026 sits below the 12% bracket. Not above it, below it. In year 1 of retirement, their optimal conversion amount is about $103,000, less than the $2.5 million couple's $129,000, with double the assets, with $4 million sitting in a traditional IRA. Here is the mechanism that makes this true. And this is the part that most general retirement advice completely skips over. The $5 million couple has $1 million in a taxable brokerage account, generating long-term capital gains income every single year. Long-term capital gains do not sit in a separate silo for tax purposes. They stack on top of ordinary income for both your income tax bracket calculation and your IRMA calculation. IRMA stands for Income-Related Monthly Adjustment Amount. It is the Medicare surcharge that applies when your modified adjusted gross income crosses specific thresholds. In 2026, crossing the first IRMA threshold adds meaningful dollar amounts per person per year to Medicare Part B and Part D premiums. There are multiple thresholds, and each one is a cliff, not a slope. You cross it by $1, and you pay the surcharge for the entire year. Now, if the $5 million couple is already generating substantial capital gains income from that brokerage account, and they layer aggressive Roth conversions on top, they blow through the first IRMA threshold in year 1. They stay above it for years. They pay elevated Medicare premiums for the duration of retirement, and here is where the math turns against the conventional strategy. Run the actual lifetime projections, and converting up to the 22% bracket costs more in taxes and Medicare surcharges over their retirement than it saves from the Roth tax-free growth benefit. Push to the 24% bracket, and it gets worse still. the projected lifetime savings from doing this correctly converting to the first IRMA threshold instead of the higher bracket everyone would have told them to fill is over $1.1 million. $1.1 million. Not from a better investment, not from timing the market or picking a better fund, from knowing which specific number to stop at in the tax code. Now pause here, because I want to say clearly what this actually means. Over a 30-year retirement, optimized tax sequencing is arguably the highest leverage financial decision you will make. It likely outperforms your asset allocation decisions in dollar impact. It almost certainly outperforms your expense ratio optimization. And yet, the standard advice, fill up your brackets, convert early, convert often, Roth is always better, gets handed out like a prescription to people with $5 million who need a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. If someone gives you a conversion strategy based on your account balance alone, without modeling your actual capital gains income, your actual projected RMD trajectory, your actual IRMAA thresholds, and your actual Medicare premium exposure over time, that is not a retirement plan. That is a heuristic wearing a retirement plan costume, and you are the one who pays for the difference. Same song, louder speakers, play to the wrong volume, the song is ruined. You might be wondering right now whether you could just run your own projections and catch this. Technically, yes. The math is not secret. The IRMAA thresholds are published by the Social Security Administration and updated annually. The interaction between capital gains and ordinary income in the bracket calculation is documented. But the problem is that you have to run all of it simultaneously, not sequentially. The conversion amount affects the capital gain stack, affects the IRMA bracket, affects the Medicare premium, affects the next year's income calculation. Move one number and 4 others shift. Most people do not catch this because they are optimizing one variable at a time, and the mistake is invisible until it has compounded for several years. This is also where Marcus comes back into the story. Marcus, who had done everything right for 30 years, had been following the conventional Roth conversion guidance. His original advisor had set up conversions into the 22% bracket. It felt responsible. It felt like proper tax planning. Nobody had run his specific IRMA analysis against his actual capital gains income. Nobody had modeled the 3-dimensional interaction of his broker's distributions, his IRA conversions, and his Medicare premium exposure in the same projection. He was operating on a heuristic designed for a median retiree. He was not a median retiree. He had $5 million and a particular account structure that made the standard advice actively harmful. When his projections were finally run correctly, the optimal conversion amount was lower than what his original plan said. His annual Medicare premiums dropped the following year. His projected lifetime tax bill dropped substantially. He had been giving money away to the IRS for 2 years that he never had to give because the advice he received was technically correct for a different person. Now, here is the thing nobody says after a story like this. This is not an argument that the financial advice industry is corrupt or that advisors do not care. Most do care. The problem is structural. General advice scales. Specific advice does not. And the $5 million retiree needs specific advice, not general advice that happens to mention high balances. The stakes are just too high for a heuristic. At this point, I want to drop something on you that I find quietly uncomfortable. Studies on retirement satisfaction. There is a solid body of research from the Employee Benefit Research Institute and others consistently show that having more money does not strongly predict feeling financially secure in retirement. What does predict it is having a clear plan you understand. People with $3 million and a detailed income plan, they can explain, report higher satisfaction and lower financial anxiety than people with $6 million who are operating on assumptions they have never tested. $6 million, more anxious, because they do not understand what they have. That is not an argument against having $6 million. That would be an absurd argument, but it is a very direct argument against treating the portfolio balance as the destination. The balance is the vehicle. The plan is the road. And you can have the nicest vehicle on earth and still be completely lost. Let me give you the framework I used to think about this, because I think it organizes the whole comparison cleanly. 3 levels of retirement clarity. Level 1. You know your monthly income and roughly what you spend. Basic but functional. Most people with 2.5 million reach this quickly, largely because the tighter margin forces clarity. You cannot afford to be vague at 2.5 million. That turns out to be an advantage. Level 2. You understand the tax sequencing of your withdrawals. Which account, in which order, at which bracket, and why. This is where the $1.1 million either gets saved or silently leaked. Most people think they are at level 2 because they have heard of Roth conversions. Hearing of something is not the same as understanding the specific version of it that applies to your specific account structure. Level 3. You understand the purpose of the surplus. What happens to the money you do not spend? Who gets it? When? Through what structure? With what intention? This is where the $5 million couple tends to get stuck for months or years, and where unresolved questions generate a persistent, low-grade anxiety that no account balance can fix. Most people think the challenge is getting to level 1. The actual challenge is that level 2 and level 3 exist and are consequential, and nobody sends you a counter invite when you arrive at them. This brings me to the legacy and giving conversation, which is where the comparison gets genuinely interesting and a little uncomfortable. For the $2.5 million couple, giving is relatively clean. Help a child occasionally. Donate to something meaningful, maybe a donor-advised fund with a modest initial contribution. The financial capacity creates a natural constraint, and constraints are clarifying. They cannot overthink it because the math limits the options. For the $5 million couple, every giving decision is a negotiation with 20 moving parts. How much and when? To which children? Equally or equitably, which are different things, especially if one child has struggled and another has thrived. Do you give now while you can see the impact, or preserve it in the estate? Do you tell your children how much you actually have? If you give $18,000 per person per year under the annual exclusion, which is the 2026 limit, is that meaningful help or background noise? If you give $50,000 per year to each adult child, does that build them up or quietly remove the motivation they need to build something themselves? These are not philosophical questions. They have real financial consequences. The $5 million estate plan is a materially different document from the $2.5 million estate plan, and the decisions embedded in it affect family dynamics in ways that outlast the money itself. I talked with a woman once. She had inherited part of her husband's estate, ended up with just under $6 million in her mid-60s, 3 adult children, 2 financially stable, and 1 who had struggled chronically. She sat down and said something I wrote down afterward because it struck me so directly. She said, "I spent 40 years worrying about not having enough. Now I worry about having too much of the wrong kind of influence over people I love." That is not a problem you solve with a better asset allocation. That is a level 3 problem. And the $5 million retiree faces it in a way the $2.5 million retiree simply does not. Because the $2.5 million retiree does not have enough surplus to create that particular kind of weight. Same song, louder speakers. The instinct at this point is to say, okay, so the $5 million couple just needs a better planner, a better estate attorney, a more sophisticated structure. And that is true, but it is only half the answer. The other half is that no planner, no matter how good, can tell you what your money is for. That is a decision that belongs to you. And until you make it, the surplus generates more anxiety, not less. The $5 million couple does not need more options. They need to choose. Now, let me walk you through the case study that crystallizes the entire comparison in real numbers. 2 neighbors, same street in Sacramento, both retired in 2024 at age 65. Robert has $2.5 million, $2 million in a traditional IRA, $500,000 in a taxable brokerage. Patricia has $5 million, $4 million in a traditional IRA, $1 million in brokerage. Same financial advisory firm, same investment allocation. They occasionally have dinner together and talk about retirement. Robert's advisor runs the specific numbers. Roth conversions up to the 12% bracket, $129,000 per year through approximately 2043. Then tax-free Roth distributions starting in 2044. Projected lifetime tax savings, $618,000. Robert does not particularly enjoy paying taxes during the conversion years, but he understands why. He knows the number. He sleeps fine. Patricia's advisor, experienced, well-meaning, working off a widely accepted heuristic, says, your IRA balance is significantly larger than Robert's, which means your RMDs will be larger, which means you need more aggressive conversions now. They set up conversions into the 22% bracket. It looks thorough, it looks responsible, but Patricia has $1 million in taxable brokerage, generating long-term capital gains every year that the plan did not properly account for. Those gains, stacked on top of the larger conversion amounts, push Patricia above the first IRMA threshold starting in year 1. Medicare surcharges begin, they persist. Run the actual projections, and the aggressive conversion strategy generated more in total lifetime taxes and Medicare premiums than it ever saved through the Roth benefit. Had Patricia converted only to the first IRMA threshold, which meant converting less than Robert, the neighbor with half her assets, she would have saved over $1.1 million across her retirement lifetime. Not through better investing, not through a complex strategy, by stopping at the right number. Robert and Patricia, same street, same advisor, same intentions. Completely opposite optimal tax strategies. Because the tax code does not scale with your wealth. It responds to the specific structure of your income. The whole just put $5 million in treasuries and collect 4% forever and never stress again advice you see in every comment section. Imagine telling that to Patricia in year 15 when her IRMA bill has quietly consumed $150,000 she never had to spend. But the math seems so simple. The math always seems simple until it meets your specific tax situation. And to the person who is right now mentally calculating whether their advisor ever ran a three-dimensional IRMA projection for them, yeah, that thought is worth following up on. Specifically, Marcus resolved this. He got his projections run correctly. He restructured the conversions. He stopped converting to the 22% bracket and started converting to the first IRMA threshold. His Medicare premiums dropped the next year. His lifetime tax projection improved substantially. But the bigger change was not financial. It was that he finally stopped trying to optimize the money and started clarifying the purpose. He figured out what he actually wanted retirement to look like in terms of time, not account balances. He had a direct conversation with his children about the estate plan, the real one, not the euphemistic one. He funded the donor advised fund he had been deferring for 2 decades. He decided what the surplus was for, and the decision, once made, removed the anxiety that the surplus itself had been generating. He still has $5 million. He is still the same person. Same song. He turned the volume down to the right level. 3 takeaways. Specific to this comparison, not generic retirement advice. First, if you carry significant taxable brokerage assets into retirement, do not apply a Roth conversion strategy based on bracket targeting alone. The 12% and 22% bracket rules of thumb were designed for people whose primary retirement asset is a traditional IRA with limited capital gains exposure. If long-term capital gains are stacking on top of your ordinary income every year, those rules of thumb will walk you directly into IRMA territory without announcing themselves. Know the actual IRMA thresholds for the actual year. In 2026, the first threshold for married filing jointly is $212,000 of modified adjusted gross income. Model your capital gains before you set your conversion target. Second, if your portfolio generates more monthly income than you actually need to spend, assign the surplus a structure before you assign it an amount. Whether that is a donor advised fund, a systematic annual give plan, a clear written intent for the estate, or a decision about a specific cause, the structure needs to come first. Unstructured surplus produces unstructured anxiety. The people who feel best about having more than they need are the ones who decided specifically what the extra is for. That decision does not make itself, and it does not improve with delay. Third, the confidence gap between a $2.5 million plan you understand and a $5 million plan you do not understand will close toward the smaller number. Clear plans beat large balances in terms of actual felt security. If you cannot explain in under 60 seconds which account you are pulling from this year at which approximate tax cost, and why you do not have a retirement plan. You have a retirement account balance. One of those things generates peace of mind. The other one just generates a larger number on a statement. Lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes. And if you spent the last 4 years chasing altcoins on your phone while a boring 60-40 portfolio quietly compounded, the invisible tuition you paid will not show up on any statement, but it is already gone.